There's certainly something to be said about discipline with respect to getting your finances under control, right? We already know that. But in my experience, I have often found that the only thing that was actually missing was just clarity over where my money is, how my decisions are impacting my level of debt, for example, in the context of this video, and how changing my decisions can impact that debt in a very particular way. Specifically, if I want to pay down a particular amount of debt within a particular amount of time, let's say 6 months, I want to see how will changing my payment amount from the minimum payment to above that minimum amount by this amount for this 6 months, how will that impact how quickly my debt is being paid down? And so what we're going to be building right now is a tool that'll help you do exactly that. Let's dive right in. Let's start with seeing what it is that we're going to build. This is called an amortization schedule. An amortization schedule is a way to see how your numbers are changing over time as you pay down the balance on a home loan. So you have a balance that you took out, you borrowed a certain amount of money, and then every time you make a payment, each month you make a payment, assuming it's the minimum payment as calculated here, a certain amount of your payment will go toward paying the interest, and then a certain amount will go toward equity, and that builds up equity in the home. You can visualize with this tool exactly what each payment is gonna, what impact each payment is gonna have, so that if you wanted to pay down your debt faster, let's say that you wanted to do a $2,500 payment instead, now you can see you built up an additional, what is that, like $600 in equity, $500 in equity on that single payment. You've reduced the loan balance and can pay down your debt faster that way. Here we go. We're gonna start with the balance of our loan. I'm going to call this mortgage. We're going to walk through a mortgage example. So we have the mortgage itself. That's the balance of the loan, however much you borrowed. We have a rate that we're going to be paying. This is annual. That depends on the terms of the loan that you got. How long that the loan term is, generally 15 or 30-year loan. Annual compounds, this is how often it compounds per year. Generally, this is 12. Monthly is pretty common. It might be different. You can check with the details of your particular loan, but 12 is probably a good guess if you're not sure. We have this thing called the periodic interest rate. This is how much interest you're paying percentage-wise every time that you make a payment. If you're making monthly payments, then you're paying a certain percentage on the total balance remaining on the loan, which is not the percentage that you got as the deal on the loan itself. That would be a huge number to pay every single month. It's a smaller number than that. We're going to work with that here in just a second. The total number of periods is going to come into account with our formula that we'll see here in a second. That is how many payments are expected in your loan in total across the life of the loan. So let's fill these out. I'm going to give another column. Let's assume that you buy a house and you put some down payment, and then whatever the remaining balance of the loan was, the amount that you had to borrow from the bank, that's the number that you're going to put here. So let's say it's $300,000. Say that, let's say the bank was, the house was $350,000, you put a down payment of $50,000, that would leave you with a $300,000 loan amount. Okay, assuming interest rates right now, roughly say 6.5%, 30-year mortgage, 12 compounds per year. We have the periodic interest rate. This is our first formula that we're going to see. The periodic interest rate is the rate that you have, the annual rate, divided by how many times you're compounding per year, which in this case is 12. If it's different for you, this same formula will work the same. It'll just give you a different number. I'm going to come over here and change this to percentage. It's going to say percentage for you. Mine says porcentaje. Total number of periods, that's how many periods are across the life of the loan. So we have 30 years multiplied by 12 compounds per year gives me 360 total. That's all the information we need. Now I'm gonna calculate my payment. I'm gonna call this in parentheses minimum because it is technically your minimum payment. Hopefully, if you get into a mortgage, you don't have what's called a prepayment penalty clause. That's where if you have a prepayment penalty clause, that's a disincentive to pay off the loan early. That's the banks playing games with you, wanting you to take your time to pay back the loan, because the longer you take, the more money that you pay in interest and the more money they make in interest. If you have that in your loan, that's not a loan that you want to sign for. I think most mortgages today probably don't have that, but just to be safe, you don't want that, because then if you make larger payments than your minimum, which you ought to, if you want to avoid paying interest, if you want to build equity in your home, if you want to pay off debt, that is how you do it, is you pay back the loan. The larger the payments and the sooner the payments that you can make, the less interest that you have to pay, and the sooner that you'll get out of debt, obviously. So this is our formula that's built into Excel. You don't have to know any of how it works. You're literally just going to click it. You're going to type equals, and you're going to click, for you, it's payment. For me, it's pago. Payment is what it's going to be called in your formula. Here's how this works. The first field is the periodic interest rate. So that's this one that we've already calculated. We don't have to do anything more. If we've already got it, you're going to write a comma. For me, it's semicolon. Number of periods, that's how many periods there are across the life of the loan. So it's another one that we've already calculated. This next field for you is going to be future value. That's, current value. We're doing current value first. The current value of the loan is how much you owe on the loan at the start of the mortgage. In this case, it's $300,000. However much you owe beginning this loan, that's the number that you put there. The future value of the loan, well, we want to pay it off, so we're going to say 0. That's how much we're going to owe at the end of this. And then finally, the last one, this is whether you want to compound at the beginning of the period or the end of the period. To be honest with you, I don't know exactly what the difference is between these two, but what I learned in college was that it's generally 0. So far, that's worked fine for me, so I'm just going to go with 0. We've calculated our minimum payment. It looks like on this loan is about $1,900. Okay, we're moving down here now to the actual, this is called an amortization schedule. The word amortize means literally to kill off. It's related to the word mortality, amortize. We have date. We're going to write period. Call this N. Payment. Interest paid. Equity earned. And the loan balance. Okay, I'm going to make these all bold, give them borders. Before putting in any of the formulas, the first thing we'll do is the first row up here. I like to just make 0 to have a start. And then the loan balance is going to be the only one that's an exception to that. We want the loan balance to be $300,000 because that's what we're borrowing. That's the beginning. And now everything else will be formulas. Assuming that you're working with a mortgage, that's what you're building here in this Excel spreadsheet, probably what you're going to put for the date column is the first day of each month, beginning the month that you're initiating this loan. So just like for demonstration purposes, let's say that the loan begins January 1st. We'll say January 1st of this year, which is 2025. I'm going to change this to short date. Okay. And then we can write just one more date of February 1st. Change that date again. And now Excel should be able to recognize your pattern and fill in the rest of them automatically. Okay, sorry about that. I forgot because my settings are in Spanish. If I type the month first, Excel will think that that's the day and then the month, and so it got messed up. So I just had to reverse it. This might be a little confusing. The first number that you see here on the left is the day of the month. The middle number is the month itself. So we have January 1st, February 1st, March 1st, etc., all the way through to December 1st of 2025. It'll look fine on yours, but that's just what happened there. Okay, I want to extend this out to the very end of my loan. I have 360 payments total. So that means the number of rows here is going to be 360. So I'm going to just simply drag this down. You can, if you drag off screen, you can drag it faster. Okay, that brought me to 360. I don't think that's not going to be quite right because we left a couple of spaces there at the beginning, but we'll fix that here in a second. Let's come over to period. This will tell us exactly how we need to go. This is literally just what payment you're at. This is the first payment, this is the second payment, the third payment, etc. Take this and double click. It's going to fill all the money automatically. Now we can come back down here and we can see, okay, it took us to 350. So we just need 10 more rows. Estimate it. Okay, looks like just a few more, or just a couple more. There we go. So that is the end of the mortgage. Now let's come back up here. Oh, by the way, I'm using control arrow in order to do that shortcut. Okay, payment. The payment on the loan is the minimum payment, and it's going to be the same every single time. If you make more than that, then if you make a payment above the minimum payment, then you'll pay off equity. You'll pay off the loan faster, and it'll build more equity. And then it has the double benefit of you're not only paying down the loan and therefore building equity faster, you're also lowering the amount that you're paying in interest every single month thereafter because you're paying interest on the loan balance of that month or the previous month. I'll show you what I mean in more detail here in just a second. Payment. The payment is, we calculated it already, it's right here, but I don't want to just leave it as F6. What I want to do is what's called fixed referencing. What that means is, I'm going to calculate this payment right here, but then every single time thereafter, because I'm going to take that calculation, I'm going to take it and drag it and move it all the way down. When I do that, if I leave it like this, the referenced cell is going to continue to go down with me, and it'll continue to reference the next down cell every time I go lower. I don't want that to happen. I want to continue referencing this exact cell again and again and again and again and again. So in order to do that, we put dollar signs in front of both of the reference, the letter and the number. So you can do that manually. What I did was I clicked F4 for the shortcut. This is going to be an absolute reference to reference this cell over and over again. So now when we take this and we double click, it's going to be the same number again and again and again. Okay, the interest paid depends on two things. What is the balance on the loan that you had before making this payment, because that is that's the amount that you're paying interest on. So we make an equal sign and we reference that last cell, and that's going to change with us every time we go down, and we're multiplying by the percent interest that we're paying per month. So not our annual rate, but our periodic interest rate up here at the top. The loan balance loan, we want to be relative referencing. We want, okay, I'm paying the periodic interest rate on this amount that I have left remaining on the loan balance right now, but next month I'll owe just a little bit less, and that's what I'm going to be paying interest on now. It's to be a little bit less than that, and then it's going to be a little bit less, and then it's going to be a little bit less, and it'll keep getting less, and I want to continue referencing relatively the cell just above and to the right, the last loan balance of my loan. However, the other piece of the puzzle, the periodic interest rate, is the periodic interest rate across the life of the entire loan. So that I want to be an absolute reference or a fixed reference. Again, I'm going to click F4 only for the F2, only for the periodic interest rate. This one I want to be relative. This one I want to be fixed. This one now should be good. I'm gonna take this down just one, just to show you what happened. Okay, so Now that I've taken that and copied that formula down, you see that this cell is being referenced relatively, meaning I'm not referencing this 300,000 number anymore. I'm referencing the one below it, which is empty right now, but that'll change. We'll fill that here in a second. And that's going to be a smaller number than the 300,000 because we've paid off a little bit of the loan, but it's still referencing the periodic interest rate because that's going to stay the same across the life of the loan. So we can take that and double click it, take it all the way down. Equity earned. This is how much of your payment went toward ownership in the home. When you're just beginning a mortgage, that's almost zero. It's very insignificant because most of your payment early on in a mortgage, early on in any loan, goes toward interest. The way to calculate equity earned is you made a payment to your lender. If you paid this in interest, which we just calculated, then the difference is what is going to be your equity earned. So I'm noticing now we're going to run into a problem because our payment by default with our calculation is negative. So I'm going to come back over here to the payment formula. I'm going to adjust this a little bit. I actually don't want the payment, so to speak. I want the absolute value of the payment. So in other words, I want, even if it's a negative number, I want a positive number. So I'm going to come in here to the formula. I'm going to type ABS for absolute value. Click that. All I have to do is put in the thing that we already had before in parentheses. I can enter, and now you see that it's become positive. We can double click, take it all the way down. Now I can come back over to equity earned. I'm going to find the difference, and it's just like you would think. I'm going to start with how much I paid. However much I paid, subtract the amount of interest that I had to pay on that payment. That's how much in equity I earned on this loan or on this payment. And you can see there's a huge gap. I paid, $1,900. 16 of those $1,900 were interest, which is crazy. And so I only earned about $300 in equity. Your loan balance is the last piece of the puzzle. We're going to come to this last cell now. And in order to calculate it, I guess we can take the equity earned and put it all the way down. Okay, so it's saying that we earn a bunch of equity because we're not paying any interest. That's not accurate. That'll change here in just a second when we adjust the loan balance. My loan balance, as I make payments on my loan, what happens is I start with the loan balance I had, and then I'm subtracting the amount of ownership that I earned on each payment that I pay. So I start with the last cell, and then I'm subtracting the amount of ownership I earned on that payment. That's it. Pretty simple. So you see, there's a few things that we can point out now here. Because my loan balance went down by the amount of equity that I built on that payment, $271.20, $299.78, or $728.80. This is my new loan balance. I owe a little tiny bit less than I did. I'm also having to pay just a little tiny bit less in interest because I'm paying the same percentage on a very slightly smaller amount. And that's going to continue all the way down. You can see now everything's starting to come into picture. You start on January 1st of 2025 with a $300,000 loan balance. You make your first payment on January 1st and bring it down like $300. After, say, 5, 6, 7, about 3 years, after your last payment of the 3 years, you have paid off $10,000. You've brought your loan balance down to $289,251.73 with minimum payments. Sweet. So now, if you've stuck around this long, I want to reward you for staying around for the video. We're going to build a couple of bonus columns. Check this out. I'm going to highlight this entire thing. The way that I did that is I clicked in this cell, I clicked Control Shift, hold Control and Shift at the same time, and then click right arrow, and then keep holding Control and Shift, down arrow again. Okay, we've got the whole table selected. I want to move this over maybe, I don't know, a bunch, because we want to get it out of the way of the cells up at the top. I'm going to do Control up arrow to come back up. I'm going to add 2 new columns. Right to the right of interest paid, you're going to enter a new column. And then right after equity earned, we're going to enter another column. Okay, now we can highlight this again. Same thing, Control Shift, hold, and then highlight what you want. Shift it back over. Okay. So we have 2 new columns here. I'm going to call this cumulative interest, and this one cumulative equity. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. This is 0, this is 0. What we want to see is right now these columns are only showing us how much interest I paid on that particular payment and how much equity I earned on that particular payment. And then I have the resulting loan balance. What I want to see is, let's say 3 years has passed. I want to see, okay, how much interest have I had to pay altogether so far? And how much equity have I earned altogether thus far? So how do we do that? It's very simple. We're going to come up here. We started with we haven't paid any interest yet. Our first payment, we're paying the amount of interest that we have paid so far, which is to say the last cell, which this is the first, it's the only one that doesn't have the formula yet, but it'll make sense here in a second, plus the amount of interest we're paying on this payment. If you take this just one down, you see if I paid $1,625 in interest on this payment, I have now paid a total of $1,625 in interest. I now take that payment that I got from last payment, and I add my new one, my new interest paid. That is the total amount of interest that I've paid altogether on this loan. I can do that same thing, and now I see the total that I had paid before plus the new interest that I had paid. That is the total amount of interest that I've paid altogether. So we can take this formula down, and you can see how very quickly your bank is making money off of you. After 3 years, you have paid $60,000 in interest. Let's see what the equity side looks like. This is assuming you make minimum payments, which is, maybe that's part of the reason for this video, is to warn you and encourage you against making minimum payments. You do not want to make minimum payments as a habit. I have a family member who has made this a habit, and he believes that he's, pulling one over on the bank because they're getting paid back slower. But the problem is you're paying way more in interest in doing it that way. He just doesn't realize it. The cumulative equity is calculated in the same exact way. I have the amount of equity total that I have paid thus far before, add the amount of equity that you've just earned on this payment. Okay, so this one, $271.20, that's how much I've earned so far on the first payment. Bring it down 1, you can see I earned $271 so far. So I add the new one to that, and I got $548,388 is my new total. My old total plus my new equity earned, and I got $818.03. Let's take a look at what this looks like after 3 years. 3 years of being in relationship with a bank for a mortgage on a home, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but just be very aware of what the numbers are, what the reality is. $60,000 of the total amount that you've paid over that time, which is the combination of these two numbers. That's about 60,000 plus, about 11,000. So like $71,000. You've paid roughly $70,000. About 60,000 of that has gone to interest, and about 10,000 of that has gone to equity. You've built roughly $10,000 in equity in your home. All right, I had actually planned on ending this video about there, but I want to show you one more thing, and that is how I use this myself for my mortgage in order to not just track the mortgage sort of as it stands, as it was written, like minimum payments wise, but how I track what I have paid and above minimum, as well as what I plan to pay and what impact that has on my equity and my interest and all of that. Okay, so what we're gonna do, I wanna come over here to a blank cell. We're gonna click Control A for all. I wanna copy everything. Okay, copy, Control C, come to the plus sign. We're gonna make a new sheet. I clicked Control Z for paste. We can select these and double click one of the column dividers to fix all the widths. The way that I use mine, the way I do this for myself is I have two sheets. This is a sheet, this is a sheet. I have two sheets lined up right next to each other. Both of them are amortization schedules. But one of them, I have my planned. We're going to rename this. I'm going to rename this mortgage planned. And I have one that's mortgage actual. And hopefully the name gives you an idea as to what I'm going for here. The mortgage planned is the payments that I'm planning to make over the course of the rest of the loan. And so I'll continue adjusting it as I go. So let's say I'm recording this right now in May of 2025. Let's say that instead of this minimum payment, I've paid instead $2,000. Okay, it's May of 2025, so that would be the last payment. And then the actual values, those would also be $2,000. But then it's May, so all of these ones, I'm gonna select all these. I did Control Shift down arrow. Those are all gonna be blank. This way, I can track right next to each other. If I'm planning this month, let's say I challenge myself to do 2,500 instead. This way I can go back and forth and I can see I've actually made these payments. And so this is the impact that it's had on my total equity and on my balance of the loan. And I can also, if I'm forward thinking, I can also look and see the impact that each payment in the future will have on each of those numbers. And so I can plan accordingly. And this will give you great clarity, which will empower you to, for example, make a goal of paying down a certain amount of the loan within X amount of years, or building up a certain amount of equity within X amount of years.